A lot of the ways to set yourself up for success as you launch out to start something is to prepare ahead of time. Prepare themselves with reserves, with runway, with the ability to fund your life while you get this thing up and running. In general, it will take longer than you think it will, and it will be more expensive than you think it will, and it will be harder than you think it will.
And what's flashy is, hey, come quit your job and you'll become a millionaire if you follow my 5 steps in the next 6 months or the next 3 months. And it just isn't reality.
If those guys can make $1 million by starting a business, then why are they trying to tell you how to start a business, right?
That's right.
That is their business.
That's right. Welcome to the Abundant Journey podcast, where we talk with incredible entrepreneurs who give world-class advice from their own journeys. I'm your host, Nick James, and I'm a commercial banker turned business owner, along with my co-host, Nick Offenkamp. We want to help you grow and scale your business while not losing sight of what matters most. Join us as we learn from the experts what it takes to grow $1 million business. What is going on, everybody, at the Abundant Journey YouTube channel? Thank you for hanging out with us today. As always, I'm your host, Nick James, and we got another special coaching session going on today. Jason Bright from Brightsmith Advisors is hanging out with me, and we actually had him back on a few months back with his business partner on the podcast, and they got a chance to tell their story, their journey. But we wanted to get you back on, Jason, because believe it or not, you guys are actually one of the most watched YouTube episodes we've had on the podcast. And so today we're going to dive in more beyond your story and your journey. We're going to kind of pull back the curtain and kind of dive into the how-to behind investing and financial advising and just a little bit more of your journey, I think, with entrepreneurs, the lessons that they can learn. So that was a big intro. Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Through Thanksgiving, looking forward to Christmas now. So it's a good time of year.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I alluded to it. We've had you on the podcast, and I want folks to go back, pause this, check out the episode, because they'll get a little bit more of your journey. But if we want to condense your story, which we had about an hour last time, let's shrink it into a couple minutes. Just tell folks who you are, what you got going on.
Yeah. So, Jason Bright, I'm managing partner at Brightsmith Advisors. We are a financial advisory firm that focuses on bringing family office type experience to folks, successful business owners that are maybe too small for a traditional family office, but no less complex. So I like to say we help business owners solve their biggest problems and achieve their biggest goals through a team-based approach of making sure they have access to the right experts that they need and guiding them through the whole process.
I love that. And again, I've said it twice. I'll say it one more time. Definitely go check out the episode, because you're going to hear his story from what got him to where he was to where he is today. So definitely, listeners and watchers, check that out. Jason, a couple things you said there before we just dive into like the straight Q&A of nuts and bolts on what you guys do. Remind our audience what family offices are about. And, I think that will segue into the first question.
Yeah. So what a family office is generally when you have these ultra high net worth families, you're the Waltons, right? The Jeff Bezoses, these guys that are in the Rockefellers. It's really something that started by the Rockefellers, was this idea that, going to the retail market to try to get really good advice can be hit or miss a lot of times. And when you have a complex situation where you're dealing with somebody that's worth $15, $20, $30 million, got a business, multiple businesses, lots of things going on, lack of coordinated advice really tends to be very problematic and creates a lot of inefficiencies in that client's financial life. And oftentimes that type of an enterprise is way too big for the family to manage on their own. And so what we provide is essentially a gigantic resource bank and a process by which these families can come to us and we can provide wealth management, tax strategy. We use some of the best tax attorneys and tax strategies that are available in the marketplace. Legal help, whether it be through crafting the right legal entity structure for not only the business, but for their family as a whole. We look at, building generational wealth and how to protect and preserve and pass on that generational wealth through creative and structured estate planning. We're typically dealing with folks that have taxable estates, or that will probably have taxable estates at some point in the future. But yeah, the idea is that there's so much to know. There's so much complexity to that situation. a single financial advisor, a single CPA, a single lawyer just doesn't have the broad expertise needed to solve that client's problem and to help
Yeah.
manage their enterprise. And so we've got a team of 70 something other professionals all around the country that have agreed to work with us. And we know enough to know who to get the clients to and to guide them through the process and really help them solve those problems and manage that enterprise in a way that saves taxes, builds wealth, preserves generational legacy, and hopefully, with all the clients that we deal with, inspires them to greater generosity over the long haul.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And this is a quick plug for you listening and watching. If you know anybody in this space or you're interested in learning more, check out Jason, the website. We'll get to that toward the end, but I think that's a great plug. I love the answer there. My exposure into family offices was when I jumped into commercial banking, and there's a lot of folks out there in that same situation. And one of the things that we talked about was how there's the big fish, the big guys, the Bezos, you talked about them. A lot of the really large money management firms target those guys. And then you have your store shops, your Ed Jones, your small brokerages. You guys have not only found that there is a huge underserviced group of clients, but in addition to that, that's a unique niche that not a lot of people go for. And really where I want to take this conversation, because I think it applies to any entrepreneur, is there's two different ways of going at things. You can really go with that laser scope focused of, I'm going to target one specific group of client, or I'm going to go shotgun blast and I'm going to really just try to target and catch as many as I can. I've talked with a lot of guys who do both. So I'm curious for you, what you would say. One, did you lean into going family office? Did you kind of go with that sniper rifle or shotgun approach? And two, how has that impacted your business?
Yeah, I mean, so when I first got started in the industry 6 years ago, it was your typical, retail advisor, retirement planning, try to serve everybody, try to be all things to everyone. And, for our industry, what I began to realize, and at least what my experience was, is that, that was a very, very crowded market. You've got so many advisors out there that are bigger, they have more experience, that have been at this longer. I got the gray beard, so I looked like I had more experience, right? So I wasn't like some 22-year-old kid out of college trying to tell some 50-something-year-old, let me manage $1 million, right? I at least looked like I had some wisdom on me. But the bigger thing is that market is just so crowded and so saturated, and you're competing over every dollar. You're competing over every tenth of a percentage point of fee. And so, on top of just kind of personality mismatches for me, and we talked about that in the last episode. But I began to, people were telling me, hey man, there's riches in niches. There's riches in niches. I'd find advisors out there that we serve Chick-fil-A operators, right? And that was their niche. Their whole advisory business was built on, being so specialized and understanding everything there is to know about the challenges that a Chick-fil-A operator faces, right?
Yeah.
And, when you have, when you really, as an advisory company, when you're talking about the kind of practice you want to build, there really is a ceiling limit to how many clients you can serve. Ultimately, we're trying to build personal relationships with our clients. And so when you look at the fact that, well, I can only serve maybe 100 clients, myself at best, it's maybe closer to 75. Now, all of a sudden, this idea of taking a laser-focused approach doesn't really seem to limit you, because I think the fear is always, well, if I decide to limit myself down to this very specific niche of client, I've got to say no to all this other stuff out here, and the fear is that it's kind of the fear of scarcity, right?
Yep.
But what we found, or I guess kind of what I found over the last 6 years of doing this, is I continually niched further and further and further and further down. And as I was able to really niche down, I was able to have a much clearer message that resonated with the exact right type of client that I deal with. And I've had clients in the past where, we decided to serve them because they had a couple $1 million to move over, and ultimately we regretted it because they were the wrong kind of client, and they ended up becoming more of a burden than a benefit. And so as I kind of went on my journey, I just found for myself that by crafting my message narrower and narrower, I got better and better results. My hit rate got higher because I didn't sound like everything else. I sounded unique. I sounded different. And the kind of clients that we were looking to serve were looking for something different.
I think that's so well said. And I think you're right. When you're early on, the fear is, man, I'm just looking to get a client. I'm just looking to get a customer. I'm just looking to bring some money in. But really having the discipline early on, and I'm sure there's going to be growing pains through it. I mean, like you said, it was a journey to crafting that message and to really getting laser focused, but trying to lean into as early as you can. Hey, this is the kind of people that I want to work with. And I think you probably have plenty of stories as well of the guys who weren't the right fit and you brought them on just because it was an opportunity to make some money. And I think history shows us that that's where 80% of the issues come from. Either they're frustrated, you're unable to serve them the way that you want to. And so I would say that makes a lot of sense. Wouldn't you agree there?
It does. Maybe it's all part of kind of the evolution too, right? I mean, I see a lot of people that want to try to get everything figured out up front before they take that step. But, along the way, like there's so many things there's just some things you can't figure out until you're in it and you do it, right?
Yep.
And part of my journey of taking the shotgun approach, because yeah, you're right. I mean, here I had a great job. I went from having a paycheck to not having a paycheck. And it's like, I don't care about niches, whatever puts money in the bank account that lets mama buy groceries this month, right?
That's right.
In the end. And then, over time, as I learned things that I never could have learned without being in the industry. You get exposed to things that you never would have been exposed to without being on that journey.
Yep.
You begin to craft your identity and begin to see and learn the things that you just can't learn unless you're doing it.
I think that's good. And I think that's, we're really comparing the two directions, but there's recognition here that there's value in both. And oftentimes we all do need to start out with that wider approach because you're just learning. Oftentimes, you've either listened to the podcast, you've read the books, you've met with people, but until your hand's in it, you maybe don't even know who you want to service or even what that message is.
That's exactly right.
You're right. It's a process. And I think that's good to recognize. Curious, in your experience, how long did it take you to kind of shift toward that laser focus and really getting serious about your specific type of client you wanted to work with?
Yeah, it took a few years, and a lot of it was just born out of frustration, right? I mean, we talked about in the last episode, I'm a mechanical engineer, right? My family likes to say that I'm an emotionless robot, right? So when it comes to connecting with people on that emotional level, I don't do so good. And so, when I first started, I was fighting that nature, right? How can I overcome this? How can I not be this? How can I adapt to be what most clients want in an advisor? And so in a way, I was kind of fighting uphill, right? And I found myself, missing out on things until one day I had an epiphany. Every financial advisor hates working with engineers because they're like me. And so instead of fighting it, why not turn it on its head and use it as a strength to go after a group of people that most advisors don't want to work with?
Yeah.
And so I started targeting engineers and said, hey, I'm the financial advisor for engineers. I'm not emotional. I don't care how you feel. I look at the numbers. I look at the data. I do math. I will give you data-driven, objective advice. And I started finding success by doing that. Yep. So instead of trying to be something I wasn't, I just tried to figure out how to take what I am and use it as a strength and find a market that targets that. And that was like my first exercise in niching down when I was on the retail side. Yeah. And then over time, I just found that I think what we talked about in the last episode, that I preferred the more complex problem. I got the same feedback from business owners where they were more logical, more rational, more numbers driven, more data driven, but the case size was a lot bigger. And the problems that I could solve were a lot more interesting.
Totally.
And so that's when we started kind of migrating into the business owner segment and drifting into the family office side of things.
No, I love that. And I love that, that experience and just stopping, not saying, hey, I'm going to do this the way everybody does it, but asking questions intentionally and then really just saying, hey, how do you play to your strengths? A lot of times we think we need to improve all of our weaknesses, but play to who you are. I think that's an awesome answer. It ties honestly into the next question here that I have. And I was thinking about it. How do you stand out in a crowded field? You talked about that early on, man. There's so much crowded people in this certain segment, but you've really said, how do I stand out? And how do I swim against the stereotype of maybe money managers or financial advisors? What's been your experience there and maybe some wisdom that you've learned?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of how to do it, man, it's, for us, a lot of it was just, some of it's luck. Some of it's just, getting involved with the right people, being open to learning. I mean, we, through a group that I got associated with, we got the opportunity to be part of this virtual family office collective that's given us access to these professionals that we work with. And, these guys had really spotted the problem in the marketplace as far as like this big underserved group of people. And, there's a great book. I think it was published by Harvard Business Review called the Blue Ocean
Yeah.
Theory or something like that. It was a lot of that idea of just trying to think through this idea of where in the market are people underserved, and how can we tailor our message to that underserved group? I mean, at first it was engineers, right? Because financial advisors don't like working with engineers. Most engineers don't like financial advisors because they think they're smarter than them. They like to self-manage. They tend to be control freaks, all the things that engineers, tend to be. And the thought process was, well, if these guys are very underserved and nobody likes working with them, let's be that guy.
Yeah.
Right? Let's craft our message to serve that. So it's a lot of it is just looking at your market, seeing how the broader scope of your competition serves the market, and trying to find these pockets of underserved groups, and then custom tailoring your message to that group, or having some, like I mentioned about the advisor that I've met that only serves Chick-fil-A operators, right? It's so specific. It's like, oh, I can have a guy that knows everything there is to know about my specific circumstance without me having to re-educate him about it.
Yeah.
I just think that kind of stuff is very powerful. And if in searching out those pockets of underserved people, and, not just, like people that don't have money are also underserved by financial advisors, right?
Sure.
But there's a reason for that, right? Because, as much as you hate to say it, I mean, everybody needs help, but we got to eat too.
Yep.
And so it's finding that group of underserved constituents of your business that have the ability and the desire to pay you for your work.
I think you're spot on with that. And another piece I would add, and I think you were sharing it just based on your background, is where is your expertise? You have your unique story, your unique journey that is tied to, the jobs you've done, the life you've lived, the people you've met. And inevitably, if you spend some time, I think, thinking through that, usually you can come up with somebody that's underserved similar to you. And we like to work with people that we are similar to. We like to work with people that we understand and understand us. And so I would probably lean into that, just like you're saying too, with the engineers. I mean, you understood how they, and do understand how they think, how they operate, how they want to manage money. So let's shift a little bit here in talking about money management, because both people are always looking for ways to manage their money. But on top of that, it's not every day we're talking to a financial advisor and a money manager. One of the problems that we hear of a lot is that people make these decisions based on emotions, that people truly lead with their emotions when it comes to what they do with their money, how they spend it, how they save it. So curious, being the engineer that you are, maybe twofold for the question here. One, what's your experience like with interacting with folks like this? Do you find that to be true? There's a lot of emotion based. How do you coach around that? But two, I mean, what's the wisdom to maybe guard around that, or tools that people can implement as they're trying to make decisions for their family, for their business, for what they got going on?
Yeah. I mean, I see it all the time, where we'll craft what we think is an incredible strategy for somebody. that saves them a ton of money, that improves their outcomes. When we look at the math shows that the outcome for them is going to be significantly better than anything they could have crafted on their own. And then the client doesn't do it for whatever reason, because it doesn't feel right. It's scary. They feel some kind of way about it. When it comes to making investing decisions, we see clients get very emotional when it comes to getting in and getting out of the market, trying to time the market. I mean, in all honesty, the public markets are so efficient. The best money managers in the world rarely beat the market. And that's a documented, there's mountains of academic evidence to show that. Even if you go back and investigate the money managers from the last 5 years that had the best performance, and you look at their performance for the next 5 years, chances are they're not at the top of their game. They're not in the top quartile. They're not in the top decile. They're probably in the mid pack or the bottom even.
Yeah.
And so people don't understand that, I feel like. And so some of it's education, but the other side of it is, I think that, people try to do things on their own without seeking wisdom, from professionals. One of the things that I view my role as with our clients is we are the objective, neutral third party, right? And so when you're paying someone for advice and that person is not in your situation, they're not in your marriage, it's not their money,
Yep.
right? They tend to be able to look at things more objectively than you do. And so, the advice that I have for people is, if you're going to hire professionals to help you, guide you on your journey, recognize and appreciate the fact that these people are emotionally objective and not tied to your situation. Obviously, find qualified, competent professionals that operate under a high degree of the ethical standards of their practice. But the fact that those advisors don't have the emotional tie and can be that objective third party, trust them to do that, and trust them to help overcome your emotions. That's how we view our role, as that emotional tiebreaker, so to speak, to encourage clients to do the right thing for themselves and not act out of emotion.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I think that applies to anybody, both business owner and entrepreneur, and, folks who have money from either working a job and whatnot. And it is an emotional thing. I'm thinking a little bit about the entrepreneur, about the person, because normally their risk tolerance or their risk profile is generally a bit higher than most folks who are in the W-2 space. Have you found that to be the case as well? Is there ever a time that you're advising people, maybe to pull back the reins, or, maybe they're like, hey, I'm all in and the chips are all in? I mean, how do you balance that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it goes both ways. I mean, you're right. My experience is that, we've seen people that are W-2 employees that have more money than they'll ever spend, that can't bring themselves to take even a little bit of risk with anything. And we've seen people that are business owners that don't have a penny to their name, that are willing to go all in on anything. So yeah, but that's generally my observation. We've had plenty of folks we've had to rein in, right? And plenty of folks that we're trying to kick to just do something in their own best interest.
Yeah.
It swings both ways, but yeah, the business owners tend to be a little bit more risk tolerant than I find that the people working a W-2 job. But I mean, that's to be expected, right? These are the kind of folks that decided to, I've always said the three most addictive things on the planet are, heroin, simple sugars, and a monthly paycheck. And so, if you're willing to break that addiction to a monthly paycheck, chances are you've got a little bit more, a little thicker skin when it comes to risk.
Totally. No, I think that's great. Would you, and I'll preface this one with, you're not giving financial advice to anybody here, seek professional counsel, but I am curious, just, entrepreneurs, oftentimes when they're early on in their journey, they're having to put all of their money into what they're building, getting clients, getting customers, getting name and brand recognition. Is there anything that they can be doing early on in their journey, to set themselves up for a better future? Obviously, being successful in what they're trying to build is a huge thing. I'm just curious if anything comes to mind there.
I mean, early on, I think a lot of the ways to set yourself up for success as you launch out to start something is to prepare ahead of time, Right. I mean, we all, everybody hears the romantic story. I mean, I think as Americans, we're always, we love the underdog story. We love the million to one shot. But the reason those stories are so powerful is because they're so unique. The reason
Yep.
they're so unique is because they're so rare, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that, the best thing, this idea of I don't have any money, I don't have any prep, but I believe in myself and I'm just going to go for broke and it's going to be fine. I think, that's kind of foolish.
Hmm.
And just because it worked out for somebody that doesn't mean that should be normative. I
Yeah.
think the best thing people can do if they're looking to start off on their entrepreneur journey is prepare themselves,
Yeah.
right? Prepare themselves with reserves, with runway, with the ability to fund your life while you get this thing up and running. Because in general, it will take longer than you think it will, and
Yeah.
it will be more expensive than you think it will, and it will be harder than you think it will. At
Yeah.
least it was for me and for a lot of the folks that we talked to.
No, I think that's awesome. And I want to wrap this up with diving just back one more time into your journey as much as you want to go back into it. But we were talking a little beforehand and just the actual journey. It's been a multi-year process to get this thing off the ground. There's been a lot of sacrifice. And, of course, as we've said so many times at Abundant Journey, how do you grow? How do you scale a business without losing your soul? I think we've definitely dove into some of those recipe and ingredients for the recipe today. But for you, maybe one last question here. Where does that motivation come from? The hard work, the sleepless nights, taking a gamble on yourself, believing that you don't want to work for somebody else, but you want to grow this thing. Where's the motivation for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. The whole motivation for starting this was wanting to be more available. I decided to own a business so I could be more available to my family, right? That sounds really ridiculous, right? I went from working 8 hours a day to 24 hours a day, and thinking about this, right? But ultimately, it has resulted in that. Early on, it really came down to in my career, I had progressively gotten more and more freedom. And then after 6 months to a year of working for myself, the idea of having to go back to having a job and working for somebody was literally soul crushing.
Hmm.
It was soul crushing. And I was making less money. I was having less fun. My
Yeah.
family was definitely, making a multitude of sacrifices in terms of time and in terms of money and in terms of lifestyle and all those things. I mean, we've poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into getting this thing up and running, distributions from my retirement, accounts, leveraging assets that we had. I mean, we've taken a lot of risk, credit cards and all that kind of stuff, which and we were prepared. I mean, I probably had, I had 6 figures worth of reserves that we were prepared to spend down to get this thing going. And even still, we had to go that route. But a lot of the motivation just came from the thought of not succeeding. I had all these clients, people that the first clients that you get are people right? It's your
Yep.
mom and your dad and your best friend and the guy you used to work with and people you have personal relationships with. And I've made a promise to them. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to manage your stuff. I'm going to make sure you don't get, connected to some of those advisors out there that are maybe a little less than scrupulous. That to make that phone call to go, hey, by the way, I'm having to quit. You got to go find
Yeah.
somebody else. Like the level of shame and embarrassment was too great for me to bear. And so it was those things that the dream that I had about being more available for my family, of serving the people that I promised that I would serve and being there for the long haul for our industry. And that's what we're trying to build is long-term relationships, and the soul crushing thought of going back to a 9 to 5 and working for somebody else
Yeah.
kept me going. And just the fact that, I've always viewed myself as an outsider in this industry and really want to serve people in a unique way that the industry is just not offering. And people told me all on the way, Jason, I know you're not having the level of success as some of these other folks that are maybe doing things the way that you don't want to do things.
Yeah.
But you're good at this.
Hmm.
You're meant for this. Stick with this. And I got a lot of encouragement along the way from people in the industry that saw the level of work that I did and the quality of work that I was doing and the heart that I had for our clients. It just encouraged me along the way to stick with it. And
Yeah.
those were really having that was a big benefit.
I love that. And that, listener, hopefully, and anybody watching on YouTube, I hope you can clearly see why Jason's such a great fit on the Abundant Journey podcast here and why we love talking to him. That story, it is not ultra flashy, but it's reality. And what's flashy is, hey, come quit your job and you'll become a millionaire if you follow my 5 steps in the next 6 months or the next 3 months. And it just isn't reality. And, we've been at this for 2 years now with the podcast, and we've had so many conversations that just echo that, have a plan in place. You do have to take a chance on yourself. The alternative of staying, working, and building somebody else's dream ultimately is not the end goal that we want to achieve. And so it's all of those pieces. It's belief from the family. And man, I just appreciate you being vulnerable. I appreciate you sharing your journey with us, because I think it's a message that continues to ring out further beyond the flashy, quick sales pitches that we so often hear.
Yeah. It's if those guys can make $1 million by starting a business, then why are they trying to tell you how to start a business, right?
That's right.
That is their business.
That's right. So true. So true. Well, man, this is awesome, Jason. It's great hanging out with you today, as always. And we're gonna keep you guys in touch with what we got going on. Remind our listeners, again, I'll say it, you guys can go back and check out the first episode. We have links there for the website and the social media things. How is it? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just check out our website, brightsmithadvisors.com. That's advisors with an O, .com. Hit us up there. We got a contact page there. You can book appointments with me on the website. We'd love to chat with you. We'd love to talk with you. And if we can't be the right fit for you, we will most definitely point you to our network of people that can help you. We'd love to chat.
Love it. Well, YouTube, thanks for hanging out with us today for one of these coaching calls. We will be back this week with another episode on the Abundant Journey podcast. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and send it to a friend. See you next time.